As soon as tariffs were mentioned by Trump, of course, every economy in the world is interested in how that might impact them. What's your reading of what Trump will do when he takes power in 6 days? How soon will tariffs be an issue? How quickly could they be imposed?
Right, right. Well, that's a really good question, and it's an important question, of course, and it varies depending upon what type of tariffs we're talking about. There's certainly some statutory authority that would allow for tariffs to go into effect relatively quickly. So let's just differentiate a couple of streams of tariffs. There's the the campaign promise and the threats of putting additional tariffs on China
Mm.
up to 60%. Those could be done under what's called Section 301, which is a trade remedy law. It's the trade remedy law that has been used to impose tariffs on China for the past, gosh, probably close to 7 or more years now. It was put into place by President Trump under his first administration, carried over by President Biden in his second, during his administration, and now so they're still in effect. He could use that same authority to increase those tariffs very quickly. Now, there's another type of tariff he's discussed and is under deliberation, and he has promised to do, which is a universal tariff,
Yeah.
which is the one that most of your listeners are probably most interested in because it would affect them directly. This tariff could also be imposed relatively quickly. There's a statute in the United States called the International Emergencies Economic Powers Act. This is a broad-based statute. It doesn't have a lot of limitations to it. Basically, the president would just need to declare a national emergency, and then he could put into place what he believes are the steps necessary to deal with that national emergency.
And can you do that even if there's no national? I mean, what's a national emergency ever? I mean, is
Well,
it? Is it?
excellent question, Stig. That is exactly the question. What is a national emergency? Well, that's why he's the president, and basically the statute authorizes the
Really?
president to decide. Yeah, so it does not have a lot of guardrails to it. Um,
And is there? I mean, he's said on his own social platform he's not backing away from this. But there is a huge risk in this, and the reason why I think people in Britain, people connected to the British government, are sceptical that he'll go all the way and impose a 10% tariff on everything, leaving aside what he might do with China and Mexico, is that America's economy is still running quite hot. Inflation is a big fear for every major economy, including America's. If you start imposing tariffs, prices go up, inflation is worsened. There's a risk to him imposing tariffs that could sort of kick him in the ass at the other end. Is that something that he will have to consider? Do you think?
Well, absolutely, and it is being considered. It's part of what others have argued, within the United States and from other governments, is that imposition of tariffs on them will only increase costs in the United States. There's not much traction for that argument within
Really?
the administration. In fact, he believes, and many of his advisors believe, that tariffs are a tool of economic growth. They'll actually grow the economy, and that any inflationary effects would be offset by tax cuts or regulatory liberalization. So there is not a big concern about increases in inflation. I wouldn't certainly bet everything that's what's going to persuade him not to do it. Now, if we see inflationary effects, that's obviously something to be concerned about, and I think the administration will want that to watch that very carefully. But will those take effect immediately? Will they be automatically
Mm.
linked to tariffs? That's an open question.
So do you think he might do this then? I mean,
Oh, yes,
so you think that he, at least at the very beginning, he's going to say, "I'm going to impose these tariffs," and whatever they might get reshaped if the effect is not what he wants, but you feel it's more likely than not that he's going to impose these blanket tariffs.
absolutely. And let me give you a couple of reasons why. Number one, he was very transparent during the campaign about tariffs. He didn't say, I might use tariffs. He said, I'm going to use tariffs. And he talked about exactly the type of tariffs he wanted to impose and upon whom. He won the campaign. He won by the majority of the vote, which has not happened for a Republican president in many, many, many years. And he brought in the House and Senate to the Republican Party, both. He kept the House and he flipped the Senate to the Republicans. So he has somewhat of a political mandate to do it. Second, we talked about the statutory authority that exists and how flexible it is. There's no real legal constraint, although he could be enjoined, and we can discuss that if you think it's of interest. But he doesn't have a lot of legal constraints on it. And he basically, since the election, has promised to do this. One of the litmus tests of his cabinet and many of his key White House appointees is whether they support a tariff agenda. And most of them, if not all of them, have come out pretty vocally saying yes, including the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, which sits in the White House apparatus and basically counsels the president on economic policy.
So
So,
he
yeah.
so basically there's a political reason. I mean the China and the Mexico tariffs are also about things like fentanyl, about the way that those borders fail to work. It's sort of a punishment tariff. But these tariffs that could go broader than that are effectively both political and economic in his mind. He wants to make America first and show he's protecting American industry, but he also thinks this is a good thing in and of itself.
Yes, that is correct. He believes this helps to grow the economy. He looks back to historical, economic history and sees periods of time, particularly the McKinley administration, where tariffs were the primary tool for raising revenue for the U.S. government, and that, in his mind, and he has said as much, has been one of the best eras for growth and greatness in the U.S.
Really. Uh,
So,
and Britain will have to lump it. I mean, ultimately, that's what this means, isn't it? That if he decides to do this, if it's a blanket thing, Britain will just have to accept that because this is something that is greater than they can control.
well, that's certainly one way to think about it. It is hard to. I guess what I would say, there's certainly some things we can't control. We can't always control what another party's going to do. We can control how we react and what we do to mitigate the impacts, and potentially, which I hope is where most of this ends at the end of the day, is in a settlement, that, or a negotiated outcome that's better for both parties. Now, I'll just note that there are some developments, at least a story that came out late this afternoon here, that talked about deliberations. We don't know if this is accurate or not, but it was a news story that talked about deliberations over a universal tariff that might be gradated. In fact, start low and go higher over time, and hoping to bring parties to the table. That could happen. Certainly, our relationship with the United Kingdom is very strong, so there is hope that we can find a way to resolve these concerns and move forward in a very positive manner. But I don't think we're going to get there without breaking some glass first.
That's a very interesting way to put it. Everett, great to speak. Well, what an interesting. It's an interesting time. In the next 6 days time, it all starts. So it's good to get ahead of this, thinking about it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.